We're going to move on, though, to Confessions of a Card Dealer, Chapter 2, Troy.
Here we go.
We're back with Chapter 2 of our series, Confessions of a Card Dealer, where our buddy Sylvain, we're kind of going along a little journey, following his journey, the ups, downs, and all the in-betweens of what life is like as a hockey card dealer.
Mm-hmm.
So in Chapter 1, Troy, we got to know Sylvain a little bit more, where he's from, what got him into this crazy business, and kind of all the other good background type information. If you did miss it, we'd recommend going back and checking out episode 201, where we did sort of the first segment with Sylvain. And today we wanted, I think, now that we got the background info, our goal was to get into it a little bit more, get into the wheeling and dealing, kind of what cards he's targeting, deals he's making, wins, losses, and all that good sort of stuff. So we hope you enjoy our second conversation with Sylvain. Chapter 2, this is Confessions of a Card Dealer.
There's some singing now.
Where's that coming from? You hit a button, Troy? I didn't hit a button. Oh, I know what that means. That means it's time for another Confessions with a Card Dealer. This time, Chapter 2. It's our second time with Sylvain. If you missed it, check out episode 201, where we got to know Sylvain a little bit, went through your background, learned you're from Eastern Canada at a place that Troy and I are still not convinced is real.
Moncton. I know it, Moncton.
Where what we learned is, according to Sylvain, people don't really speak French. They don't really speak English, but you speak both French and English. So go figure.
Exactly.
Go figure that out. And Sylvain is a card dealer. And what he's agreed to do is come on every couple weeks and kind of update us on the life of a card dealer and give an honest perspective of what it's like. And so the first place I want to start is kind of the whole summer thing. So we're in now the middle of the off season, the middle of summer, kind of the nothing going on really from a hockey perspective. I think the Blue Jackets hired a coach. That's what the biggest news in the past week.
Our old coach,
Creed from The Office. Did you see that? Doppelganger, yes. Kind of.
Oh yeah, he's totally Creed from The Office. Hey, good job, Columbus. You got a good coach. Be happy.
So what does a hockey card dealer do at the end of July, beginning of August? Like, what's your life like right now?
Good question, Josh. First of all, thanks for having me on for episode 2. Hopefully it means I did something right on episode 1. So I'm excited to keep this going. It's a good question. Like, honestly, summertime has always been, because this is, I want to say, my 4th summer. So this is still, I still feel I'm wet behind the ears and I still have a lot to learn. I think being a card vendor is something that takes years to master, like 5 to 10 years. With that said, during the summer, usually I would stock up a ton and hope for it to go up in September or October. That's backfired the last, few summers. So right now I'm kind of just, I didn't find the prices go down that much. I haven't seen the prices go down that much. Yeah. So, I find maybe a lot of people are thinking that, I'm going to hold this for September, October. So the supply is a little bit lower. Mm-hmm. So, and if the demand is not, if the demand isn't as low, the prices are going to stay, right? So I did buy a lot, and I posted this on my Instagram. I bought 5 Austin Matthews PSA 10 Young Guns and a Draisaitl PSA 10 Young Guns from a good buddy of mine who is a card dealer who also he graded those cards himself. Okay. Grade your cards yourself. You have way more profit, to like, sure. You have a much bigger, I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for, but you have more room to play with. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he's giving me a really good deal where I think I can make, I don't know, about $200 per Matthews if I sold them right now. I might sell 1 or 2 because the supply is still kind of low and they still go for about $1,100 Canadian. And I might hang on to 3, hope that they go up September or October. So right now I'm actually in a little bit of an analysis paralysis mode where I'm not committing to any purchases right now. I think if I were to spend, I am sitting on, a bit of money. I think if I were to purchase something, it'd be a collection or a lot. and hopefully a mixture of graded and raw, or just raw where I can grade myself.
Sure.
It's really when you grade yourself that you get, especially when you hit 10s, that you get the most on your ROI.
Mhm.
You never know what you're going to get, right? So if it's a really popular player that's easy to move, like Austin Matthews, I don't mind buying it already graded as a 10 and moving it for, 15%, 20% profit versus buying it raw, grading it, getting a 10 and hoping for 100% profit. Sometimes when you hope like that, you'll usually hit a 9.
Yeah. Well, what do they say? Wish in one hand, do something in the other, and see which fills
Yeah.
first, right?
Yeah.
That's how that goes. Now, we did a little bit of a pre-meeting just to get an idea what was going on and sort of where we wanted to take our conversation. And I thought what came out of it is, and this is really what we want to do. You've had, I think, and we'll learn more about, you're kind of sitting on what looks like to be a pretty big win. And then you've had kind of a pretty big loss too, just to balance out sort of that it is to some degree a gamble and you have to learn through your mistakes and all that. But let's be fun and let's start with the win. And I have a little bit of a preamble to this. So, and I'm not going to give all the details, Savannah. I'll let you do that. But you bought a lot.
Yep.
When you were going to buy it, I got to be transparent. I'm like, ugh, I don't think I would do that. Like, I was just like, my instincts were telling me no. And, we'll get into some of the reasons why in a second. But it turns out it's kind of been a big win for you. So once again, I know nothing. And this is why I'm not a car dealer. But why don't you explain the lot that you bought and kind of what's unfolded to this point?
Sure. So what, and to be fair, when I bought it, I also wasn't 100% sure, but I did consult with an experienced vendor, and his answer was easy money at that price. He said easy money, and I was still kind of scared to buy for this much. So yeah, it was a Zach Hyman collector. I purchased it for a certain amount. It was in the 4 figures. It was a lot of around 40 some cards. Some of them were graded, some of them were raw. I did get them in the mail, so I didn't get to inspect the raw cards before receiving them, or before actually before committing to buying them. And so I didn't know how well those would grade, right? The raw ones.
Okay, well, I just want to stop you like really quick though, and this is like where, and I don't know how you felt, because you were kind of communicating in one of the group chats we're on about that you were thinking about buying this lot. And my thought was, yes, Zach Hyman scored 50 goals last year. He did play, there's the Toronto kind of tie into him. It was a nice story. But as we know, like one of sort of the rules of the hobby is that there's one usually big hobby chase per team. A few teams, there's 2, but not many. There's definitely not 3, and 4 is not going to happen, right? And then you got the Oilers where you have McDavid, you have Draisaitl, and then you have, the third could be Hyman, could be Evan Bouchard, could be some other people. And that was my concern, is there enough of a chase for this guy? But again, I'm an American. I don't understand the Canadian market. And so I just wanted to throw in, like, when I was thinking,
right,
I don't know if I would do this, I guess that's where I was coming from.
So where my thought process was like, this cost me less than 2 McDavid PSA 10s. So 40 some cards cost me less than 2 McDavid PSA 10s. And you had some high-end stuff there, like Future Watch Auto inscribed. There were 4 Future Watch Auto inscribed. One of them was a PSA 10, 2 were BGS 9.5, one of them was raw. And I cracked the BGS 9.5s and sent them to PSA. They're currently being graded now. And the PSA 10 sold for about 20% of the entire lot that I bought. So I think when you have high-end cards of a player that might not be McDavid level or superstar level, high-end cards, there are still some player collectors out there that will pay decent money for
the right card.
Yes, exactly. And there were several of those bangers in that lot. And now there were quite a few Young Gun raws, Young Gun silver foil raws, and nothing too expensive, but I think I paid about like $8 per raw Young Gun. And when I got them all, there's only, I think there were about 20 raw cards in there. There's only 2 of them 3 of them that I decided not to grade. So all the rest of them, about 18, around 18 cards, are at PSA. I think actually I said 18. I cracked BGS. I think there's around 21 or 22 cards at PSA right now being graded. So
Okay, so would you say like in any successful deal, no matter how many of the bases you cover, I's you dot, T's you cross, that there's sometimes an element of luck that comes into it too?
100%, absolutely. And I'm at the point now where I know what traps to avoid because I've done them, or I've fallen into those traps, and I'm getting better at calculating my risks, but it's still not an exact science. There is a lot of luck involved. If all of these raw were in terrible shape, my profit could have been way less. I've sold about 12 or 13 of the 40 cards, and I'm at about 90% from breaking even. So I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, so you're almost at like guaranteed profit level at this point. Now, Troy, when he was in our chat saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about buying this lot," what were you thinking?
I just won because I know who Zach Hyman is, but I have no clue what his market was, so there was no way I would touch these. But given I didn't think about the whole two Connor McDavid PSA 10s were more expensive than 40 Zach Hyman's, who's coming off a career year. Now it's like making a little more sense to me, but I would have not done it just because I didn't know Zach Hyman that well, his market. I mean, I know he had a good year, and it's just like I didn't come out of nowhere, but man, he's usually a 20 goal scorer, and all of a sudden he's got 50. So I mean, buy and move fast as possible.
Well, and Savannah, another I think really important point that you made that's good for everyone to know, whether it's for a PC or in flipping type thing or whatever your goal is, you weren't afraid to ask other people's opinions and say,
100%.
am I crazy here? Or this looks like a good deal. Is it a good deal? What do you think? What would you do? I think there's a lot of value to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like one of the things that I didn't expect to cherish so much out of the hobby. Don't get me wrong. I love my collectibles. I love the inanimate objects that I get to keep, but it's the relationships and the chatter and the talking, like even just like our friendship now. It's just like, I have friends who are collectors. I have friends who are vendors. I have friends in the hobby in whatever capacity, whether they're in it as a business or as anything. So it's really, it's pretty awesome. And I think honestly, and it is a little bit of a slippery slope because I like receiving advice, but I like giving advice too, but I can't be giving advice, all day long. I have, even since my first episode, I had people reach out, say, what do you think this card's worth? And like, that's a question I get a lot. And I used to just look it up for them and tell them, but now I tell them how to find it.
Oh, that's what we do too.
Yeah, we get that too. I got a question. So this is kind of going off the rails. Apologies for the dog barking in the background, but have you ever had it, and maybe this was earlier when you started out dealing, have you ever had where you were talking to someone for advice and all of a sudden they kind of figure out who you were talking to and then kind of went around your back to try to see if they could get the deal? I've always wondered how that works when there's so many people talking and not everyone's a friend. Not everyone.
Yeah, no, that's true. That hasn't happened to me yet.
I was hoping for so spicy. I'm a tabloid journalist. Let's go.
Moncton is quite small.
I guess. Yeah.
So maybe if I was
in
Toronto.
Oh yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah, but if I was in Toronto, maybe that'd be different. I remember having 2 friends from Toronto. One of them was like, I'm trying to win this card. Don't you bid on it. I was like, I would never do this. He's like, oh, my friend would. And I was like, well, if it's not, you found it first. I would never do that kind of thing. But I think Maritimers are a little bit too nice sometimes, maybe to a detriment. But it hasn't happened yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
Okay, so to kind of tie out the whole Zach Hyman lot conversation, when's your goal? Like in an ideal world, when do you have all these sold by and kind of tally up your profits at that point?
I want to say probably September or October. As soon as those cards come back from PSA, I'm probably going to move a bunch. What's funny is I had give you an example. One of those cards was an acetate Young Guns. I had it at the Montreal show for $300. I had it priced at $300. No one bit. I didn't even get a nibble in Montreal. I sent it to Slab Sharks and it sold for $555. So at this point, I do want some for my regulars, because I know a lot of my regulars here in Moncton, they like to come at my table, see what I have new. I do like to try to sell it to my regulars before I send my inventory to Slab Sharks. I'm so close to the break-even point right now that I don't mind waiting till the first show in Moncton comes up before moving these. So to answer your question, yeah, I'm hoping by October or November they'll be moved, and I don't mind if he goes down a little bit in price.
Yeah, because it's all kind of gravy at this point. Now, how repeatable is this scenario? Is this kind of like a once in a blue moon find, or can you kind of rinse and repeat with this strategy a few times?
Well, it's funny if you if you find lots online or like either on Facebook or even on eBay, sometimes you'll have some sellers that sell lots, especially the auction ones. It can be repeatable. I think I was very lucky. It's the first time a lot of this kind of magnitude came into my orbit. And I also, funny enough, like 3-4 weeks prior to that, I bought a vintage lot of like maybe just 12 cards, but I bought it. One of them was a Bobby Orr rookie, graded a CSG 1.5, and I cracked that and send that to PSA. And I think even if it gets a PSA 1 at the price I paid for the lot, I think it's going to be, easy gravy. It's like I'm counting my blessings here, because yeah, they don't come all the time, but I've also realized that the more money that you have, not that I have a ton of money, but like the more money that you have to spend on cards, the easier it is to buy a lot, because you have cash. The person wants to liquidate, and if you're ready to pay, and that's kind of why I'm sitting on my, almost 5-figure stack, because I'm looking for the right lot, because those so far have been the most profitable. It doesn't mean I'll find it, and I might find another deal elsewhere, but that's why I kind of have that ready for if I do find a lot. I might even make a Facebook post like buying a collection and hoping that they'll come to me, and then I'll pick the right one.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's a nice win. Congratulations. We're happy for you. Of course, we root for you to win in everything you do. Now, you had also brought up again, a cool goal. This is transparency, right? Is that you're not one of these guys that is out there on social media with the Midas touch, right? Everything you do turns to gold, right? Is that you have to, well, you can look at it, I guess, a certain way. You win either way. You either make money or you learn a valuable lesson, and you're prepared to talk about, I guess, one of your valuable lessons. So what was that strategy?
Yeah. So this strategy, so when the Series 1 came out, my buddy's a huge Devils fan, and we were watching the game, and we were watching Ty Smith play, and I was like, oh, I don't think his Young Gun was in Series 1. I was like, okay, it's in Series 2. And when that came out, I bought a boatload of Ty Smith Young Guns on ComC and through ePacks, because I do have a friend who buys exclusively on ePacks, and he sends it to PSA, and his gem rate is actually pretty good. So I did have that approach for a while. I bought about 30 Ty Smith Young Guns, and back then there were about 20 Canadian, but I also bought like 20 French ones, which were like $45 Canadian. And then I sent them for grading. This was while PSA was on lockdown. I sent them for grading, and a lot of them came back 10s. I have a huge stack here. It's it's
what
like
is this, 2021?
The 2021 Series 2.
Okay.
And one of them actually, the French one, graded an SGC 10 gold label pristine, which is, that was pretty sweet.
That's a tough grade.
Yeah, absolutely. I was super ecstatic about these, but I realized now that back then I was buying much faster than I could move stuff. And this was a card where I'm like, oh man, I bought this, I want to say, in like April and May. So like they hadn't made the playoffs that year. So I'm like, okay, come October or November, they'll bounce back, and then he ended up getting traded to Pittsburgh and then getting demoted to the AHL, and I was like, oh my, okay. So I at this point, I've just kept them as a reminder. And Josh, I was certain. When I was doing this, I was certain. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna make so much money on this. This is gonna work out so well. I find the faster you can be humble and not be so certain about any of your decisions in the hobby, I think the better you'll do. So that was a humbling experience. And, it probably cost me, back then it was $40 per card to grade Canadian. So, it's not a huge sum, but I mean, it's about $1,200 to $1,500 that now is probably worth all these cards together are probably worth $200. So yeah, it was definitely a humbling lesson. And I have them as a reminder to like not be so sure when you make a move. And I think I also went all in on one player. I don't think you shouldn't be looking for one player. You should just be looking for good deals.
Well, on a prospect too. If you're going to go all in, go on Mario Lemieux, probably. I'm assuming. But, and actually, you tell me if you agree or disagree, and maybe you too, Troy. I have this sort of theory that a lot of new collectors kind of prescribe to, and it's wrong. And I think I was the same way. I think when you come into the hobby and you're first getting into it and you're looking at it, you assume that time is your friend. And what I mean by that is you think, okay, I'm going to buy all these Ty Smith. I'm going to get them graded. I'm going to sit on them for 6 months, and they're going to go up in huge amount of value. I think in actuality, though, when it comes to dealing, time is actually not your friend. That more often time kills you versus helps you. Would you agree?
100%. Now I had a vendor who is really successful in this space. He's like, you need to treat your money and your cards like a hot potato. As soon as you have money, you have to want to spend it on something. And then as soon as you have inventory, you want to move it as fast as you can. During the pandemic, I was maybe moving 20% of my inventory and holding 80%, thinking, oh, it's just going to keep going up. And then I'm going to, it's going to be
cash in.
Yeah. I was treating them as like I would stocks, like I would dollar cost average in ETFs and which is a good strategy, but not with cards. So I learned that, the hard way. And you treat it like hot potato both ways. So I sold it, like I said, about 20 or 25% of my inventory and held on to the rest. Well, a lot of those were SGC graded cards. I was like, well, my theory, and I was new, and I had a theory, was like, well, SGC has really good turnaround time. PSA is taking like a year and a half. I heard some people took like a year and a half to get their cards. People are going to be so impressed by SGC that you're going to see more and more young guns, and people are going to start buying SGC. That was my kind of thesis, and in practice, it did not. It didn't pan out at all. So yes, time is not your friend. I mean, I'm not saying that you can't invest in cards. If you buy a McDavid PSA 10 when he dips and you have $3,000 to park, that's not necessarily a bad move, but you're just if you're not a vendor and you're just a collector and you want to own a card that you think is going to go up in 5 years, great.
Sure.
Do that. But if you're a vendor, the faster you move stuff, the better. Even if it goes up 50% in 3 months. I remember beating myself up like, oh my God, Kill Makar. I sold my Kill Makar for $500, my PSA 10, and it went up to 900. Oh, I should have waited. And no, I realized too, when it went up to $900 Canadian, that window was very small, and you can't be chasing those small windows. And I'm actually happy because the guy who bought it from me for $500, he's a returning customer. He didn't feel like I sold it to him at the peak just to make a quick dollar. And so that's something to consider as well. Like, you want to move it as fast as you can to be fair and to have repeat customers.
The other thing I think about when reflecting on your like Ty Smith experience is and almost even a given year when we're excited about the new players and the prospects and the rookies, we can convince ourselves of about 15 guys
Oh
that,
yeah.
oh my gosh, this guy, even look at this year. You've got Matthew Nyes, Luke Hughes, Brock Faber, Leo Carlson, Adam Fantilli, Simon Nemec, Connor Bedard, of course. I mean,
Right.
we could literally come up, I think, with 15 guys, no problem. Devin Levi, Dustin Wolf, right?
Right.
But then now, fast forward 5 years, and when you look back, 5 years down the road, we're lucky if there's one hobby relevant guy
Yep.
from that year, and we as like a hobby always forget that
Absolutely.
most of these guys are not going to pan out.
I agree. And I think the guys who are worth investing in have already exploded. Like a McDavid, like a Matthews. You're not going to find the diamond in the rough that you might get lucky, but you might as well buy a lotto ticket. Unless you really like that player and you want to collect him. I still think you should wait a year or two. If you really like that player and you want to collect him, you'll get him much cheaper, but you're not going to find that diamond in the rough. Even if you watch a lot of hockey and you're prospecting, you're like, oh my God, this kid is really good. He's going to go places. He might, but his hobby relevancy might be gone because there might be another player from that same team that just got drafted number one and he's killing it. And one more thing to touch on selling it fast. And we were talking about this before, during our warm up is I'd rather right now I had people wanting to sell me lots and I'm like, you know what? I'd rather wait until September and sell them in October. And even if I have to pay a little bit more for the lot, I'd rather pay a little bit more in September and move it in a few weeks than to buy it now and hope that it goes up in October. I have bought lots in the summer in the past that didn't go up. And, 30% of the guys went up, but 50% of the guys dropped, like 50%. I remember buying a 5-figure lot about a year from now, a year ago. And there were a lot of guys like Tyler Bertuzzi, PSA 10, like they had just gotten traded to the Leafs. And Bertuzzi, Max Domi, there were a lot of new Leaf players in PSA 10s. They were like that summer, they sold for like 180 Canadian. By the time the season came, and I was at shows and it was time to move stuff, they were like $70. And there were probably like 20 to 30 PSA 10s of those players. So whatever profit I made on the other guys got killed by those guys. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a challenging game for sure. And I guess the last question I have for you today along the lines of this conversation is, and I this is related again to the whole factor of time thing. I think what makes it particularly hard is it's not just the hockey world and the hockey cycle and the hobby cycle. You have to worry about the macro world
Absolutely.
too. And with our country driving so much of the world economy, and I think as we know, it ain't exactly stable here right now. If you're buying a lot expecting to sit on it in 5 months, I would just assume party has to be thinking, I don't know what the world's going to look like 5 months from now.
100%. I hear a lot of people when I'm at shows, they're talking about Ovechkin. They're like, oh my God, I heard someone tell me he bought 30 Ovechkin Young Guns because when he breaks the record, he's going to explode. And I told him, dude, be careful. Just because one of the arguments, but look at the prices Gretzky fetched. It was like, there are so many nuances between Ovechkin and Gretzky, especially with their rookie cards. Like there are like 3 or 4 PSA 10 Gretzkys. There's more than 3 or 4 PSA 10 Ovechkin Young Guns. But there's also, macroeconomics. Like, yes, even if that player has a bright future, who knows what the economy is going to be like in 2 years? He could technically be selling at a high price in 2 years, but if everything else went down because the economy is not great, you lost money. So it is very, but it's very tough to master, and I don't even think I'll ever fully master it. But learning the process is something I have shivers just talking about it. I love that I found something that's so complicated and nuanced, yet I have some skill that complement my journey, including like sales. My sales skills are pretty decent. that I love when I make mistakes, I don't beat myself up. And I'm like, okay, that's a learning experience. I love the whole process. And to be honest, guys, like I've been doing this 4 years. In my pocket, paid myself, I might have pocketed $2,000 like in this 4 years. Everything, everything was reinvested into. I have a separate checking account for cards. And it's been like that for almost 4 years. And I could have probably paid myself a little bit more during the pandemic when the sales were high, but I
Sure.
learned my lesson because I was reinvesting in cards and then it all went down, which was, it was too bad. I could have probably paid myself an extra 10 grand and still be where I am at now. But 10 grand in 20 years from now, because I'm in this for the long haul. And in 20 years from now, 10 grand's not going to be much.
Yeah. Well, just to piggyback off of a comment you made a minute or two ago, I don't think you can use Wayne Gretzky as a comparison for anything in this hobby. It's
Not
a
at
total.
all.
He's a total outlier. There's nothing that's even relevant in the same universe that his cards live in, and so it's anytime somebody wants to compare Ovechkin or Crosby or anyone to Gretzky, it's
Right.
probably a moot argument at that point. Okay, well, we're going to check back in a few weeks. Before we let you go, though, so what's the? I assume then you're just kind of on the lookout for lots. If people have anything that might be interesting, they
Yeah.
should reach out to you
Yeah.
and
Reach
willing
out
to
to me
look
on
at anything.
Instagram or Sylvain at slabsharks.com, Sylvain at slabsharks.com. And yeah, I'd love to negotiate and see if we can work out a deal. And for probably my next appearance, I'll probably have those Zach Hyman cards and a few more cards back from grading. And yeah, so that's something to look forward to.
All right. Any other questions for Savant Troy before we let him go? Yeah, me, bud.
Failed. The dogs were barking, so I went on mute, and then I failed to take myself off mute. I need a big mute icon that shows me on mute. No, I'm just fascinated by this whole process. I know I would totally suck at it, so that's why it's nice to hear someone that's actually good at it and an expert kind of give advice.
Right. Well, I don't consider myself an expert yet, but I appreciate that. And the thing is, I knew that I was meant for this when I failed a few times. And I didn't want to quit. I didn't want to throw in the towel. I'm like, oh, you know what? I want to keep doing this. Had I lost, 20 grand, like that, maybe I would have, okay, maybe this isn't for me. But I've had as many wins as I've had losses. And I think with experience and my calculated risks and my educated guesses and just getting a better understanding of the landscape, I think, it's going to start looking better as depending on the moves that I make.
All right. Well, we'll be back in a few weeks for another Confessions of a Card Dealer. Thank you very much, Sylvain, for coming on and sharing your experience.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Okay. We'll be back in a few weeks to check in again with Sylvain for another edition of Confessions of a Card Dealer. But I thought a really interesting conversation, Troy. What did you learn?
You're telling me card dealers don't have 100% success rate? I would never know that from all the stuff I see on social media. It seems like that's all they do.
Instagram, you would never
roll in the money. Oh, look at all these deals I've made, all this money I've made. No, I love the honesty. I love hearing about the wins. I like hearing of instances where there wasn't a win or there's some losses. It's the reality of the business. Not all businesses are 100% successful.
Mm-hmm. I think there is something to the longer you do something, the more experienced you are, that you get a knack for certain things, and you're maybe better able to identify deals that typically will work out. But as we'll get into a little bit later on when we're going over the market, there's no way to predict what's going to happen with any card values. There's just no way.
Well, plus,
you can slice and dice all you want.
Yeah, with what I don't know, losses maybe is the wrong term, but it's like you do win because you learn a lesson. Yeah. You learn something that you put in your file cabinet of knowledge, and so you can remember that next time a situation like that comes up.
Well, I think a lot of it goes back to going to the pandemic, right? Where that was kind of more of a viable strategy. It's like everything was going up so fast, everything was moving so fast. Oh, here's a young prospect. Like, I don't know if I would have picked Ty Smith just because he probably wasn't in our orbit. Yeah. Like other guys were, but it's like, oh, Dylan Cousins. right, from the same year.
Mhm.
He's going to be awesome. I should go buy 70 of his Young Guns. Well, Phil, right? How many?
Yeah.
Phil bought 300 Shane Pinto Young Guns.
Yes.
Yikes. So I just love it, though. I love his honesty. I love the fact that he's willing to kind of let us behind the
Yep.
curtain and talk candidly about some of these deals, because I think it demystifies, right, some stuff like this, and we all learn. It lets us learn from some of the lessons that he's kind of had to go through too. So very excited to come back again in a few weeks.